Imani Davis has always been a fighter. As a bright, ambitious student from a struggling neighborhood, she's clawed her way into the prestigious Brookfield Academy, an elite school dominated by the children of the wealthy and powerful. But life in the hallowed halls of privilege isn't easy, especially when Imani becomes the target of relentless bullying from Chloe Whitman and her clique of mean girls who will stop at nothing to tear her down. All Imani wants is to survive her senior year, secure a scholarship, and leave her harsh reality behind. But when she secretly helps a seemingly ordinary janitor at the school, Imani sets off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Little does she know, the man she's been helping holds the keys to changing her life forever. As graduation day approaches, tensions rise, secrets unravel, and Imani is thrust into the spotlight in a way she never imagined. With everything she's worked for hanging by a thread, Imani will discover that sometimes, the people you least expect have the power to change your world. In this gripping and inspiring tale of resilience, kindness, and unexpected twists, the scholarship that changed everything will remind you that no good deed goes unrewarded, and that even in the darkest of times, hope can shine through. Based on a true story. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. Imani Davis stood at the wrought iron gates of Brookfield Academy, taking in the grandeur of the school. The tall brick buildings, manicured lawns, and students walking around in their designer clothes made her feel out of place. As she adjusted the strap of her worn backpack, she reminded herself why she was here. This was her ticket to a better future. All she needed to do was survive senior year, excel in her classes, and earn a full scholarship to college. It was her only way out. Steeling herself, Imani took a deep breath and walked through the gates, blending into the sea of affluent students. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact, hoping to stay unnoticed. But it was hard not to feel the weight of curious stares as she walked past groups of students who whispered behind their hands. She knew what they were thinking: she didn't belong here. As she made her way to her first class, Imani clutched her schedule tightly. Every part of her screamed to turn around and run back to her old neighborhood where things made sense. But she couldn't give up now. She'd worked too hard to get here, and this was her one shot at securing a better life for herself and her family. The day dragged on as Imani navigated through crowded hallways and luxurious classrooms filled with the latest technology. During lunch, she found an empty table at the far corner of the cafeteria. She was about to pull out her sandwich when she heard the mocking laughter of a group of girls approaching. "Look who we have here," a voice called out. Imani looked up to see Chloe Whitman, the queen bee of Brookfield Academy, flanked by her clique. Chloe was everything Imani wasn't: blonde, tall, dressed in designer clothes, and dripping with confidence. Chloe looked Imani up and down with a sneer. "Wow, did you get your clothes from a thrift store? Or was it a garage sale?" Her friends burst into laughter. Imani's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes on her lunch, refusing to engage. She knew better than to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Her mother's words echoed in her mind: "Don't let them see they've hurt you. They only have power if you give it to them." But Chloe wasn't one to back down so easily. "Hey, I'm talking to you," she snapped, knocking Imani's sandwich onto the floor with a swift flick of her hand. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and laughter as the other students watched the scene unfold. Imani's hands clenched into fists under the table, but she took a deep breath and forced herself to stay calm. She picked up her lunch bag, her eyes downcast, and walked away, leaving behind the snickers and whispers that followed her. The rest of the day was a blur. Imani kept her head down, determined to focus on her studies. But the sting of Chloe's words and the humiliation in the cafeteria clung to her like a shadow. It was only the first day, and already, it felt like a lifetime. As the final bell rang, Imani walked quickly through the hallways, eager to leave the suffocating atmosphere of Brookfield Academy behind. On her way out, she noticed an older man struggling with a cart full of janitorial supplies. He was short and wiry, with gray hair peeking out from under a worn cap. "Do you need some help?" Imani asked, walking over to him. The man looked up, surprised. "Thank you, miss, but I can manage," he said with a kind smile. His name tag read Mr. Thompson. "It's no trouble," Imani insisted. Together, they pushed the cart down the hallway toward the supply closet. Mr. Thompson thanked her profusely as they unloaded the supplies. "You're a good kid," he said, his eyes crinkling with a warmth that made Imani's day feel a little lighter. Not many students here would stop to help an old janitor. Imani shrugged, smiling shyly. "It's no big deal. My mom always says kindness doesn't cost anything." Mr. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother raised you right. You'll go far, young lady." As Imani left the school grounds, the weight on her shoulders seemed to lift a little. The day had been rough, but there was a small comfort in knowing she had done at least one good thing. Even if it was just helping a janitor, it reminded her of who she was and where she came from. The sun was setting as she walked to the bus stop, the last rays of light casting a golden glow on the sprawling campus. Brookfield Academy may have been intimidating and hostile, but Imani was determined not to let it break her. She had a mission, and nothing, not even Chloe Whitman and her cronies, would stop her from achieving her dreams. As the bus pulled up, Imani climbed aboard, already planning how she would study for the scholarship exams. She didn't know what the rest of the school year held for her, but one thing was clear: she was ready for whatever came her way. Little did she know, her kindness to Mr. Thompson would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The second day of senior year dawned with a sense of foreboding for Imani. As she entered the school, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact. Brookfield Academy's grand hallways, lined with plaques celebrating wealthy alumni, only served as a reminder of how different she was from the students who roamed its polished floors. Imani reached her locker, hoping to quickly grab her textbooks and head to her first class without incident. But as she fiddled with the lock, she heard a familiar, condescending voice behind her. "Hey, it's Miss Charity Case. How's life on the free lunch program?" Chloe's voice dripped with mockery. Imani could hear the snickers from Chloe's friends, who had formed a semicircle around her, blocking any chance of escape. Imani gritted her teeth, trying to ignore them as she focused on opening her locker. She didn't want another confrontation. Not today. But Chloe wasn't one to let things go so easily. The blonde ringleader stepped closer, her designer perfume filling Imani's nostrils. "Don't pretend you can't hear me," Chloe said, her voice low and threatening. "You may have snuck your way into this school, but don't think you're one of us. You'll always be trash." Imani's hands trembled as she finally managed to get her locker open. She tried to focus on the textbooks she needed, her heart pounding. She didn't have time for this. She had to stay focused on her studies if she was going to earn that scholarship. That was the only thing that mattered. But as she turned to walk away, Chloe knocked the books out of her hands, sending them sprawling across the floor. The hall erupted in laughter, students gathering around to watch the spectacle. "Oops," Chloe said with a smirk, her friends giggling behind her. "Maybe you should go back to whatever public school you came from. Clearly, you don't belong here." Imani knelt down, collecting her scattered books. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let them see her cry. That was what they wanted, to see her break. Instead, she focused on gathering her things, each breath measured and steady. "Leave her alone, Chloe," a voice called out from the crowd. Imani looked up, surprised. It was Marcus, one of the few students who had been friendly toward her. He stepped forward, his dark eyes flashing with anger. "What's your problem?" Chloe crossed her arms and shot him a withering look. "Mind your business, Marcus. Just because your dad's on the board doesn't mean you can tell me what to do." Marcus shook his head, his jaw clenched. Whatever, Chloe. You're pathetic. He bent down to help Imani gather the rest of her books. Imani mumbled a quick thank you, her cheeks hot with embarrassment. As they walked away together, Marcus leaned in and whispered, "Don't let her get to you. Chloe's all bark and no bite." Imani gave him a small, grateful smile. "I'm trying. But it's hard when she's everywhere." Marcus nodded. "I get it. But you're stronger than she is. Just keep your head up." By lunchtime, Imani thought the worst was over for the day. She found a secluded spot outside under the shade of a large oak tree, hoping to enjoy a few moments of peace. She had barely unwrapped her sandwich when she felt a cold splash of liquid on her back. Startled, she turned to see Chloe standing behind her with an empty soda cup, a triumphant grin on her face. "Oh no, did I spill something on you?" Chloe said with a mock gasp. "I guess that's what happens when you sit in my spot." Imani's jaw tightened, her clothes soaked and sticky. She could hear laughter from nearby students who had witnessed the scene. Anger bubbled up inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Getting into a fight would only jeopardize her chances of getting the scholarship she desperately needed. "Seriously, what's your problem?" Imani demanded, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Chloe's smile faded, and her eyes narrowed. "My problem is people like you who don't know their place," she hissed. "Brookfield isn't a charity. It's for people who actually belong here." Imani bit her tongue, refusing to give Chloe the satisfaction of seeing her lash out. Without another word, she turned her back on Chloe, ignoring the sticky mess on her clothes, and walked away. She could hear the whispers and laughter following her, but she kept her head held high. The rest of the day was a blur of classes and whispered gossip. Imani kept her focus on her work, trying to ignore the snickering and side glances from her classmates. But it was hard not to feel the weight of their judgment. As the final bell rang, Imani headed to her after-school study session. She had barely sat down at her usual desk in the library when her phone buzzed with a message. She hesitated, then opened it to see a text from an unknown number. "You don't belong here. Leave before it gets worse." Imani's heart skipped a beat, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the screen. She didn't have to guess who it was from. Chloe and her friends were making it clear that they weren't going to stop anytime soon. But as she took a deep breath, Imani reminded herself of her mother's words, "Keep your eyes on the prize, no matter what." Imani put her phone away and opened her textbooks. She couldn't afford to be distracted. She had to be better, stronger, and smarter than them if she was going to win that scholarship. They could try to intimidate her all they wanted, but she wasn't going anywhere. Little did Imani know, this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test her in ways she never imagined. The next morning, Imani woke up early, determined to leave the previous day's humiliations behind. She focused on her goal: keep her grades up, stay out of trouble, and secure that scholarship. She arrived at Brookfield Academy before most of the students had shown up, hoping to avoid any run-ins with Chloe and her posse. As she walked through the near-empty hallways, she noticed Mr. Thompson, the elderly janitor she had helped the previous day, struggling to push a cart filled with cleaning supplies toward the gymnasium. The wheels squeaked loudly, and it looked like he was having trouble with one of them. Without thinking twice, Imani approached him. "Mr. Thompson, do you need some help?" she asked, offering him a warm smile. The older man looked up, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "Oh, it's you again, Miss Davis. I appreciate it, but I wouldn't want to hold you up." "It's no problem, really," Imani insisted. "I have a little time before my first class." With her help, they managed to push the cart to the gymnasium much faster. As they walked, Mr. Thompson began to chat with her. "You know, most students here don't even notice me, let alone offer to help," he said with a soft chuckle. They're too busy with their own lives. Imani shrugged, adjusting her backpack. I was raised to treat everyone with respect, she said. My mom always told me it doesn't cost anything to be kind. Mr. Thompson gave her a long, thoughtful look before nodding. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. You know, I've been working here for years, and I've seen a lot of kids pass through these halls. Most of them think the world owes them something. But you're different. Imani felt a warm flush rise to her cheeks. I just try to do the right thing, she said quietly. It's hard sometimes, though. Mr. Thompson nodded again, his eyes crinkling with a smile. It may be hard, but it's worth it in the end. You never know who's watching or how it might pay off. His words lingered in Imani's mind long after she left to attend her morning classes. For some reason, she felt lighter, as if a small weight had been lifted off her shoulders. It was a small comfort amidst the daily challenges she faced at Brookfield Academy. Later that day, as Imani sat in English class, she tried to focus on the lecture about symbolism in classic literature. But her mind kept drifting back to Mr. Thompson's words. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the sound of snickering from behind her. Chloe and her friends were whispering and passing notes, glancing in Imani's direction. Imani did her best to ignore them, but it was hard to concentrate when she felt their eyes boring into her back. When the bell finally rang, Imani gathered her books quickly and headed toward the library. It was one of the few places in the school where she could find some peace. As she settled into her usual corner, she was surprised to see Mr. Thompson again. He was mopping the floor near the entrance, humming a quiet tune. Hey, Mr. Thompson, she greeted, setting her books down. He looked up, his eyes brightening when he saw her. Well, hello again, Miss Davis. Shouldn't you be taking a break instead of burying yourself in books? Imani smiled faintly. I don't have much choice, she said, pulling out her notes. I need to study if I'm going to keep my grades up and get that scholarship. Mr. Thompson's expression softened. Ah, the famous Brookfield scholarship. That's quite the prize. But let me give you a piece of advice, if you'll hear it. Imani nodded, intrigued. Sure, I'd love to hear it. Mr. Thompson leaned on his mop handle, looking thoughtful. It's good to work hard and aim high, but don't forget to live a little. Sometimes, the best opportunities come when you're not looking for them. Imani furrowed her brow, not quite sure what he meant, but she appreciated the sentiment. Thanks, Mr. Thompson. I'll keep that in mind. As the day turned into evening, Imani stayed late in the library, working on her essay for history class. She was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice the time until the librarian, Mrs. O'Connell, tapped her on the shoulder. Time to pack up, dear, Mrs. O'Connell said kindly. The school is closing soon. Imani thanked her and began to gather her things. As she walked through the dimly lit hallways toward the exit, she heard raised voices coming from one of the classrooms. Curious, she peered through the crack in the door to see Chloe and her father, Mr. Whitman, arguing. You don't understand, Dad. Chloe snapped. That scholarship should be mine. I deserve it. Mr. Whitman, a tall man with graying hair, looked exasperated. You have everything you could ever want, Chloe. Why do you care so much about a scholarship? Because it's the principle. Chloe hissed. I won't let some nobody like Imani Davis take it away from me. If she wins, it'll make me look bad. Imani's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized just how far Chloe was willing to go to sabotage her chances. Quietly, she backed away and hurried down the hall, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Chloe wasn't just tormenting her out of boredom. This was a calculated effort to destroy her chances at winning the scholarship, and Imani had just become her biggest threat. That night, as Imani walked home, her thoughts kept circling back to what she had overheard. She knew Chloe was cruel, but hearing her father's indifference and Chloe's ruthless determination made it all too real. Imani had to be even more careful now, especially with Chloe pulling strings behind the scenes. The next day, Imani arrived at school earlier than usual. She was on edge, keeping an eye out for any more signs of sabotage. As she walked through the empty hallways, she was once again greeted by the sight of Mr. Thompson, this time polishing the brass fixtures by the main staircase. "Good morning, Miss Davis," he said cheerfully. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," she replied, a bit distracted. Noticing her worried expression, he paused. "Something on your mind?" Imani hesitated, then decided to confide in him. "It's just, there's a girl here who's trying to ruin my chances at a scholarship. And I overheard her father practically giving her permission to do whatever it takes." Mr. Thompson's eyes darkened, his usual smile fading. "Sounds like you're in a tough spot," he said quietly. "But remember, sometimes the best way to beat people like that is to rise above them. Keep doing what's right, even when it's hard." Imani nodded, feeling a little better. "Thanks, Mr. Thompson. I'll try." As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about him. He wasn't like the other staff members at Brookfield, there was a quiet wisdom in his words that seemed deeper than his role as a janitor. Little did she know, her kindness toward Mr. Thompson would soon lead to an unexpected turn of events that would change her life forever. The air was abuzz with excitement at Brookfield Academy as the principal, Mrs. Hargrove, took the stage in the grand auditorium. The students, dressed in their expensive uniforms, filled the seats, chatting animatedly about the upcoming announcement. Imani sat in the back, trying to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. She was here for one reason only, to hear about the scholarship that could change her life. Mrs. Hargrove tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the large room, bringing the students to silence. "Good morning, everyone," she began with a broad smile. "As you all know, every year, we award a prestigious scholarship to a senior who demonstrates not only academic excellence but also outstanding character and leadership." Imani's heart pounded. This was her chance. If she could just hold it together and keep her grades up, she might actually win this scholarship. It was the one thing that could lift her family out of their financial struggles and secure her future. She couldn't let anything, especially Chloe, get in her way. Mrs. Hargrove continued, "This year, the selection process will be particularly rigorous. In addition to maintaining top grades, applicants will be evaluated on their contributions to the school community and their ability to demonstrate integrity and resilience." A murmur spread through the crowd, and Imani noticed Chloe whispering to her friends in the front row. Chloe glanced back, her eyes locking with Imani's for a brief, menacing moment. Imani quickly looked away, focusing on the principal's speech. "Now, I encourage all of you who are interested to sign up in the guidance office. The winner will be announced at the end-of-year award ceremony," Mrs. Hargrove concluded. The students applauded politely, but the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew that the scholarship could make or break someone's future. As the assembly ended, Imani made her way to the guidance office to sign up. But when she turned the corner, she nearly bumped into Chloe and her clique. "Watch where you're going, loser," Chloe snapped, flipping her long blonde hair over her shoulder. Her friends snickered behind her, their eyes gleaming with malice. "I'm just trying to sign up for the scholarship," Imani said quietly, trying to step around them. But Chloe blocked her path. "Oh, you think you have a chance?" Chloe's voice was laced with sarcasm. "Face it, you don't belong here, let alone deserve that scholarship. Why don't you just save yourself the humiliation and quit now?" Imani's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to let Chloe get under her skin. Instead, she took a deep breath, stood up straighter, and looked Chloe in the eye. "We'll see about that," Imani said firmly, stepping around Chloe and making her way to the guidance counselor's office. She signed her name on the list with a sense of determination. This scholarship was her ticket to college, and she wasn't going to let anyone scare her away. The pressure was on. Over the next few weeks, Imani threw herself into her studies, spending long hours in the library after school. She knew that her grades alone wouldn't be enough. She had to prove that she was more than just a smart student. She had to show leadership, integrity, and resilience. But Chloe and her friends weren't making it easy. Every day, they found new ways to sabotage her efforts. One afternoon, as Imani worked on a project in the computer lab, the screen suddenly went black. A message popped up, "Nice try, but you'll never win." Imani's heart sank. She glanced around, but the lab was nearly empty except for Chloe and her clique giggling in the corner. She knew they were behind it, but she had no proof. Instead of wasting time trying to confront them, she took a deep breath and moved to another computer, starting her work over again. Later that week, as she was heading home, Imani noticed that her locker had been tampered with. Her notebooks were missing, and her textbooks were soaked in something sticky. She could feel the anger rising inside her, but she forced herself to remain calm. She didn't have time to play Chloe's petty games. Imani took her ruined books to Mr. Thompson, who was mopping the floor nearby. "Mr. Thompson, can you believe this? They're trying to sabotage me," she vented, unable to hold back her frustration any longer. Mr. Thompson looked at the ruined books and sighed. "Some people will do anything to get ahead, Miss Davis. But remember, it's not about how they act. It's about how you respond." Imani shook her head. "I just don't understand why they hate me so much. I'm not even a threat to them." Mr. Thompson gave her a knowing look. "Sometimes, people fear what they can't control. They see something in you that threatens them, even if you don't realize it yourself." The pressure intensified as the scholarship selection committee began evaluating candidates. Imani worked tirelessly, attending after-school study groups, volunteering at the local community center, and keeping up with her assignments. But the stress was taking a toll on her. One Friday evening, after another long day, Imani stayed late to help Mrs. O'Connell organize books in the library. As she left the building, the sky was already darkening. She was exhausted, her backpack heavy with textbooks and notes. As she passed the parking lot, she noticed a sleek black car idling near the entrance. Curious, she slowed down. To her surprise, she saw Mr. Whitman, Chloe's father, standing by the car, talking to someone. Imani hid behind a nearby tree, straining to hear their conversation. "I don't care how you do it," Mr. Whitman said in a low, harsh voice. "Just make sure that scholarship goes to Chloe. We've invested too much in this school for my daughter to lose to some charity case." Imani's breath caught in her throat. So it was true. Chloe wasn't just a bully, she was backed by her powerful father who was willing to do anything to secure her success. This wasn't just about teenage rivalry. It was a game of power, and Imani was caught in the crossfire. The next morning, Imani could barely focus in class. She kept replaying what she had overheard. How was she supposed to compete against someone with that much influence? The scholarship was supposed to be about merit, but it was clear that Chloe was willing to use every advantage at her disposal. During lunch, Imani confided in Marcus, the one friend she had made at Brookfield. "What am I supposed to do, Marcus?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They're trying to rig everything." Marcus frowned. "That's messed up, but you can't give up now, Imani. You're smarter than Chloe, and you've got something she doesn't." "What's that?" Imani asked, feeling defeated. Marcus gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Heart. You actually care about more than just winning." That's why you're going to beat her. Just keep doing what you're doing. Imani nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe Marcus was right. Chloe and her father might have money and power, but Imani had something they couldn't buy: resilience. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes had just gotten even higher. Chloe was playing dirty, and now, it seemed her father was in on it too. But Imani was determined not to back down. She would fight with everything she had, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in her. Little did she know, her biggest test was yet to come, and it would take more than just hard work to win this battle. The weeks leading up to the scholarship deadline were nothing short of grueling for Imani. She spent every waking moment juggling her classes, community service hours, and studying late into the night. Her eyes had dark circles under them, and her nerves were stretched thin. But as hard as she tried, it seemed like the harder Chloe and her friends worked to tear her down. One cold morning, Imani walked into school to find her locker plastered with mean-spirited notes. "Go back to where you belong. You'll never fit in here. Loser." The words were scrawled in different handwriting, but the message was clear. Imani glanced around and saw students pointing and laughing. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Taking a deep breath, she ripped the notes off her locker, stuffed them into her bag, and gathered her books. She couldn't afford to let it affect her focus. She had a history exam to ace that morning, and nothing, not even Chloe's cruel antics, was going to distract her from that. As Imani hurried to her class, she ran into Marcus in the hallway. His expression darkened when he saw the remnants of the notes in her hands. "I can't believe they're still doing this," he said, shaking his head. "You should report them." Imani gave him a tired smile. "And what's that going to do? Chloe's dad practically owns the school. No one's going to listen to me." Marcus frowned, his jaw clenched. "Well, they can't stop you from winning that scholarship. You've worked too hard to let them get to you now." Imani nodded, appreciating his support, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread gnawing at her. She had been walking a tightrope, balancing her studies, the scholarship competition, and trying to survive in a school where she was constantly under attack. The real blow came that afternoon. Imani was in the middle of her history exam, diligently answering the essay questions, when Principal Hargrove entered the classroom with a stern expression. "Imani Davis, please come with me," she said in a tone that left no room for argument. Confused and anxious, Imani put down her pen and followed the principal. The other students whispered behind her as she walked past, their eyes filled with curiosity and amusement. Chloe gave her a smug smile, clearly enjoying the show. Imani's heart raced as they reached the principal's office. Inside, Chloe and her father, Mr. Whitman, were already waiting. Mr. Whitman's sharp gaze made her stomach churn. He looked like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Please, have a seat, Imani," Mrs. Hargrove said, her voice cold and formal. "We've received some very troubling information." Imani's mind whirled. What could this possibly be about? She hadn't done anything wrong. Mr. Whitman cleared his throat. "We have evidence that Imani has been cheating on her exams," he said, holding up a folder. "Several students have come forward with proof." Imani's eyes widened in shock. "That's not true. I've never cheated," she protested, her voice trembling. Mrs. Hargrove looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and suspicion. "Imani, we found notes with answers to the test in your locker this morning. Care to explain how they got there?" Imani's heart sank. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Chloe must have planted the notes in her locker. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but the weight of Mr. Whitman's accusations and Mrs. Hargrove's piercing stare made her words stick in her throat. "I swear, I didn't put those notes there," Imani said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Someone must have planted them." Mr. Whitman smirked. Of course you'd say that. But we have witnesses, and if the school board finds you guilty, you could be expelled. That would mean an automatic disqualification from the scholarship. Imani felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. This was it. Chloe and her father had set her up, and they were playing for keeps. After what felt like an eternity, Mrs. Hargrove dismissed her with a warning that the school board would investigate further. Imani walked out of the office feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under her. The walls of Brookfield Academy felt suffocating, the stares of her classmates like daggers piercing her from all sides. By the time she reached the school courtyard, Imani couldn't hold back her tears. She found a secluded bench behind the gym and sat down, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. All her hard work, all her sacrifices, it was all falling apart. How could she fight back when Chloe had the entire school, even the administration, on her side? Lost in her despair, Imani didn't notice Mr. Thompson approaching until he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Miss Davis, what's wrong?" he asked softly, concern etched on his weathered face. Imani quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed to be seen crying. "It's nothing," she mumbled, trying to sound strong, but her voice cracked. Mr. Thompson sat beside her, waiting patiently. Finally, Imani couldn't hold it in any longer. She poured out the whole story, the bullying, the threats, and now the accusation of cheating. Mr. Thompson listened quietly, his face serious. "That's a tough spot you're in," he said after she finished. "But I believe you, Imani. I know you wouldn't do something like that." Imani sniffed and looked at him, surprised. "Why do you believe me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Mr. Thompson gave her a small smile. "Because I've watched you these past few months. You're a good person, and you're stronger than you think. Don't let them win, Miss Davis. You've got something they can't take away, your integrity." Imani nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She didn't know what she would have done without Mr. Thompson's support. For the first time that day, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way out of this nightmare. The next day, Imani knew she had to fight back, but she needed proof to clear her name. She enlisted Marcus to help her investigate. They started by speaking to students who might have seen anything unusual near her locker. Most were reluctant to get involved, fearing Chloe's wrath, but one student, a shy sophomore named Emily, admitted she had seen Chloe's friends lingering near Imani's locker the morning of the exam. "That's all I saw," Emily said nervously. "Please don't tell anyone I told you." Imani thanked her, trying not to get her hopes up too high. It wasn't much, but it was a start. If she could gather more evidence, maybe she could convince Mrs. Hargrove that she was innocent. But Chloe wasn't done yet. That afternoon, as Imani left the library, she was cornered by Chloe and her friends in the empty hallway. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Chloe sneered, her voice a low whisper. "But no one's going to believe you over us." Imani stood her ground, her heart racing. "I'm not afraid of you, Chloe. I know what you did, and I'm going to prove it." Chloe's smile widened, but her eyes flashed with something darker. "Good luck with that. But by the time you do, you'll be long gone." Imani watched as Chloe and her friends walked away, their laughter echoing through the hall. The stakes had never been higher, but she was more determined than ever. She wouldn't let Chloe win. Not this time. Imani felt like she was caught in a storm, surrounded by chaos with no end in sight. The accusations against her were spreading like wildfire, and it seemed as if every student at Brookfield Academy had an opinion. Walking through the hallways, she could hear whispers behind her back, some students casting her looks of pity while others openly sneered. She tried to stay focused, but the cloud of suspicion hanging over her made it almost impossible to concentrate on her studies. Her teachers were watching her more closely, and even Mrs. O'Connell in the library seemed to keep a wary eye on her. Imani felt the walls closing in. On Friday afternoon, as she was heading to the library to study, Marcus caught up to her. "Hey, Imani, wait up," he called, jogging to her side. Imani gave him a tired smile. "Hey, Marcus. What's up?" "I heard what happened," he said, his voice low so no one else could hear. "I can't believe they're trying to pin this on you. It's so unfair." Imani sighed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. "Yeah, well, Mr. Whitman practically owns this school. They can say whatever they want, and everyone will believe them." Marcus shook his head in frustration. "That's not right. You've worked too hard for this." He glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "I've been thinking. There's got to be a way to prove that Chloe set you up. I want to help." Imani was taken aback. Marcus was one of the few people who had stood by her, but she hadn't expected him to go this far. "Really? You'd do that for me?" "Of course," he said, his eyes serious. "You're one of the good ones, Imani. And I'm not going to let Chloe get away with this." The next morning, they met in the library before school started, going over what little evidence they had. Marcus had brought his laptop, and together they searched for any information that might help. Imani explained what Emily had told her about seeing Chloe's friends near her locker. "If we can just get someone to back up Emily's story, maybe Mrs. Hargrove will listen," Imani said, her voice tinged with hope. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but Chloe's clique is tight. They're not going to turn on her easily." Just as they were about to pack up and head to class, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening. "You're not going to believe this," he said, showing the phone to Imani. It was a text from an unknown number. "I know Chloe set you up. Meet me behind the gym after school." Imani's heart skipped a beat. "Do you think it's real? Or could it be a trap?" Marcus frowned, thinking it over. "There's only one way to find out. But I'll go with you, just in case." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Imani was nervous, her mind racing with possibilities. If this anonymous tip was real, it could be the break she desperately needed to clear her name. But there was also the risk that it could be another one of Chloe's schemes. As the final bell rang, Marcus and Imani made their way to the back of the gymnasium. The area was deserted, save for a few old benches and piles of equipment stacked against the walls. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, making the place feel isolated. After a few tense minutes, a figure stepped out from behind a stack of gym mats. It was Emily, the shy sophomore who had given Imani the tip about Chloe's friends. Her eyes darted nervously around as she approached them. "Emily?" Imani asked, confused. "You sent that message?" Emily nodded quickly. "Yeah, but I couldn't say anything in front of the others. Chloe's friends would make my life hell if they knew I was talking to you." Marcus stepped forward, his voice gentle. "We appreciate you coming, Emily. But we need more than just your word. Do you have anything that can prove what Chloe did?" Emily hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I didn't want to get involved, but I recorded something the other day," she whispered. She played the video, and Imani's breath caught in her throat. The grainy footage showed Chloe in the school courtyard, surrounded by her friends. "I planted those notes in her locker myself," Chloe was saying, a smug grin on her face. "If she thinks she's getting that scholarship, she's delusional." Imani's hands shook as she watched the video. This was it, the proof she needed. Marcus looked just as stunned. "Emily, this is huge. You've just saved Imani's future." Emily looked relieved but still anxious. "You can't tell anyone I gave you this. If Chloe finds out, she'll ruin me." Imani placed a hand on Emily's arm. "I promise, your name won't come up. Thank you so much." That night, Imani and Marcus worked on a plan. They needed to get the video into Mrs. Hargrove's hands without tipping off Chloe or her father. They decided that Marcus would anonymously email the video to the principal with a note explaining the context. It was a risky move, but it was the best shot they had. The following morning, as Imani arrived at school, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. For the first time in weeks, it seemed like she might actually have a chance to clear her name. As she walked through the halls, she noticed Chloe giving her a particularly smug look, clearly thinking she had already won. But Imani had one last card up her sleeve. She just had to wait and see if Mrs. Hargrove would do the right thing. As the school day went on, whispers began to circulate. Word had gotten out that the principal had received some kind of damning evidence. Imani could feel the tension in the air. In her last class of the day, a message crackled over the loudspeaker. Imani Davis, please report to the principal's office. Imani's heart raced as she stood up. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod as she left the classroom. The walk to the office felt like the longest of her life. When she entered, Mrs. Hargrove was waiting, her face unreadable. Miss Davis, she began, gesturing for Imani to sit. I received an anonymous video this morning. It appears to exonerate you from the accusations of cheating. Imani let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. So, does this mean? Mrs. Hargrove nodded slowly. It means the investigation is over. You're no longer under suspicion. She paused, her expression softening slightly. I'm sorry we put you through all of this. I'll be having a conversation with Mr. Whitman and Chloe about their conduct. Imani's relief was overwhelming, but she knew this wasn't the end. The battle with Chloe wasn't over yet, not until the scholarship winner was announced. But for now, she had won this round. As she walked out of the office, Imani felt a surge of determination. Chloe's dirty tricks had almost destroyed her, but she had proven that the truth could prevail. With Marcus and unexpected allies like Emily on her side, Imani knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. Little did she know, the biggest twist of all was still waiting in the shadows. The atmosphere in Brookfield Academy was tense the following week. Whispers swirled through the hallways as students speculated about what would happen next. Ever since the principal had received the anonymous video proving Imani's innocence, Chloe and her clique had been uncharacteristically quiet. But Imani knew better than to let her guard down. If there was one thing she had learned, it was that Chloe wouldn't go down without a fight. Despite the victory of clearing her name, Imani couldn't fully relax. The scholarship decision was just days away, and she knew Chloe would pull every trick in the book to get ahead. But for now, Imani was determined to stay focused. She was so close to achieving her dream, she just had to hang on a little longer. On the morning of the scholarship announcement, Brookfield Academy was buzzing with anticipation. The entire school gathered in the auditorium, where the principal would announce the winner. Imani sat toward the back, her stomach twisted in knots. Marcus was beside her, offering quiet words of encouragement. You've got this, Imani, he whispered, giving her a reassuring smile. They wouldn't have cleared your name if they weren't seriously considering you for the scholarship. I hope you're right, Imani replied, though doubt still gnawed at her. She glanced toward the front, where Chloe sat with her friends, looking as confident as ever. Chloe's father, Mr. Whitman, was seated with the school board members, his gaze fixed on the stage. Mrs. Hargrove took to the podium, her voice ringing out across the auditorium. Good morning, students, faculty, and honored guests. Today, we are here to recognize the hard work and dedication of our senior students, and to award the prestigious Brookfield Academy Scholarship. The crowd fell silent as she continued. This scholarship is not just about academic excellence, but also about character, leadership, and resilience. The decision was not easy, as we have many deserving candidates. However, one student stood out this year for her perseverance and integrity. Imani's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. She clenched her hands together, silently praying that all her hard work had paid off. Please join me in congratulating Imani Davis. For a moment, Imani was too stunned to react. The sound of applause and cheers filled the auditorium as Marcus nudged her. You did it, Imani. Go up there. Shaking with disbelief, Imani rose from her seat and made her way to the stage. She could barely hear the applause over the rush of blood in her ears. As she approached the podium, Mrs. Hargrove smiled warmly at her. Congratulations, Miss Davis. You've truly earned this. Imani took the microphone, her voice trembling as she thanked the faculty, her friends, and her family. But as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The entire time, Chloe sat stone-faced, her eyes narrowed with fury. Imani knew this wasn't over. As the crowd began to disperse after the ceremony, Imani was approached by Mr. Thompson, the janitor she had befriended. He was beaming, his eyes crinkling with joy. I knew you could do it, Miss Davis, he said, giving her a proud nod. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, Imani said, genuinely touched by his support. I couldn't have done it without your encouragement. Mr. Thompson hesitated, then leaned in closer. There's something I need to tell you, Imani. It's time you knew the truth. Imani frowned, confused. What do you mean? Mr. Thompson smiled gently and motioned for her to follow him. Come with me. There's someone you need to meet. Imani followed Mr. Thompson down a series of winding hallways, away from the bustling crowds. They reached a quiet corner of the school where the administration offices were located. Mr. Thompson led her into a small conference room where a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit was waiting. Imani, I'd like you to meet Charles Thompson, the janitor said with a twinkle in his eye. He's the main shareholder of Brookfield Academy. Imani's eyes widened in shock. Wait, you're related? Charles Thompson nodded. Yes, Mr. Thompson here is my father, he said with a warm smile. We often do these undercover evaluations to see how students treat the staff. You've impressed us more than you know, Imani. Imani was speechless. But, why? She managed to ask, her mind spinning. Charles Thompson's expression turned serious. This school is full of students who think their wealth and status make them better than everyone else. But you've shown kindness, integrity, and resilience, even when others tried to tear you down. That's why, in addition to the scholarship, I'd like to offer you an internship at my company. It's a chance for you to gain experience and open doors that might otherwise be closed. Tears filled Imani's eyes as she tried to process everything. She had come so close to losing everything, only to gain even more than she ever imagined. Thank you, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. This means more to me than you'll ever know. But just as Imani was starting to feel a sense of relief, the door to the conference room burst open. Chloe stormed in, her face red with fury. This isn't fair, she shouted. You're giving everything to her just because she's a charity case. My father paid good money to support this school. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, his eyes cold. That's exactly the problem, Miss Whitman. Your father's money doesn't buy integrity. You and your friends tried to destroy Imani's future, but she proved to be stronger than your petty schemes. Chloe's father, Mr. Whitman, appeared in the doorway behind her. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, glaring at Mr. Thompson. I won't have my daughter humiliated like this. Charles Thompson turned to Mr. Whitman, his expression stern. You should be ashamed of yourself, trying to rig the scholarship and bully an innocent student. Effective immediately, your family's donations will no longer influence how this school is run. And as for Chloe, she will face disciplinary action. The room was silent as the weight of his words sank in. Chloe's smug confidence crumbled, and Mr. Whitman's face turned a deep shade of red. He tried to protest, but Charles Thompson cut him off. This school is about values, not the size of your bank account. You would do well to remember that. Imani couldn't believe what she was hearing. For so long, it had felt like Chloe and her father were untouchable. But now, they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. As the tension in the room settled, Charles Thompson turned back to Imani. Your kindness and integrity have been tested, and you've shown strength beyond your years. I'm proud to have you as part of our community. Imani felt a surge of pride and relief. She had won not just the scholarship, but also the respect of those who truly mattered. And, for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged at Brookfield Academy. As she left the conference room, Marcus was waiting for her outside. What happened in there? He asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Imani smiled, wiping away a tear. Let's just say, karma finally caught up with Chloe. Marcus grinned, pulling her into a celebratory hug. I knew you'd pull through, Imani. You always do. Imani looked back at the school that had once felt like an impossible challenge. Now, it felt like the beginning of something new, a future she had fought hard to earn. Little did she know, there were still a few surprises left in store for her before the school year was over. The days following the scholarship announcement were surreal for Imani. The looks she received from her classmates had shifted from disdain to cautious respect. Whispers of her victory circulated throughout Brookfield Academy, and for the first time, Imani walked the hallways without feeling like she had a target on her back. But Chloe Whitman was far from defeated. The fact that Imani had won the scholarship, despite all her underhanded efforts, had lit a fire of rage inside her. Chloe couldn't bear to see Imani's triumphant smile as she walked through the school, surrounded by congratulations from students and teachers alike. Chloe was determined to take back control, no matter the cost. One rainy afternoon, as Imani was packing up her books in the library, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Marcus. Meet me outside the auditorium ASAP. It's urgent. Imani's heart skipped a beat. She grabbed her things and rushed to the auditorium. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking her by the time she arrived at the entrance where Marcus was waiting, looking grim. What's going on? Imani asked, breathless and dripping. Marcus looked around nervously before pulling her under the awning. I just overheard Chloe talking to her dad. They're planning to use their connections to get your scholarship revoked. They're going to claim you cheated after all. Imani's heart sank. But I was cleared. Mrs. Hargrove saw the video and exonerated me. Marcus shook his head. Chloe's dad isn't giving up. He's calling in favors with the board members to force them to reopen the investigation. They're saying the video you submitted was doctored. A cold dread washed over Imani. Chloe and her father weren't just sore losers, they were relentless. What do I do, Marcus? If they succeed, I'll lose everything. Marcus's jaw clenched. We're not going to let that happen. You have allies now, Imani. We just need to stay one step ahead of them. The next day, Imani found herself back in the principal's office, facing Mrs. Hargrove once again. This time, however, Charles Thompson was there too, seated beside the principal with a serious expression. Imani, Mrs. Hargrove began, folding her hands on the desk, I'm afraid Mr. Whitman has formally requested that we reopen the investigation into your scholarship application. He claims to have new evidence that suggests you tampered with the original video. Imani's stomach churned, but she kept her composure. That's not true. You've already seen the evidence, Mrs. Hargrove. You know I didn't cheat. Charles Thompson cleared his throat and leaned forward. Imani, I believe you. But Mr. Whitman is pushing hard. The board is under pressure, and some members are considering rescinding your scholarship until this matter is resolved. Imani's breath caught in her throat. But, you can't just take it away. I've worked so hard for this. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes softened. I understand how you feel, Imani. But Mr. Whitman has powerful connections. We're trying to buy some time, but you need something concrete to counter his claims. Charles Thompson nodded. If there's anything more you can find, any proof that Chloe and her father are behind this, we need it now. Imani left the office feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under her. She was on the verge of losing everything she had fought for. But one thing was clear, she had to dig deeper and find irrefutable evidence to expose Chloe's lies. That evening, Marcus and Imani huddled in the library, brainstorming their next move. We need to get ahead of this, Marcus said. If Chloe's dad is claiming the video was doctored, there has to be a way to prove it's authentic. Imani sighed, feeling overwhelmed. I don't know how we're supposed to do that. They have all the resources in the world. Marcus suddenly snapped his fingers, his eyes lighting up. What if we go straight to the source? Emily. She filmed the original video on her phone. If we can get her to testify that it's real, it might be enough to sway the board. Imani hesitated. But Emily was terrified of Chloe. If she comes forward, she'll be targeted even worse than before. True, Marcus conceded, but we don't have any other options. Let's talk to her. Maybe we can convince her that doing the right thing is worth the risk. The next day, Imani and Marcus found Emily in the art room during her free period. She looked up, startled, when they walked in, her expression wary. Emily, we need your help, Imani said, her voice pleading. Mr. Whitman is trying to take away my scholarship, and they're claiming your video was fake. Emily's face went pale. I can't get involved again, Imani. You don't understand what Chloe can do to me. Marcus stepped forward, his voice gentle but urgent. I know it's scary, but you've already helped so much. If you testify that you took that video, it could make all the difference. Emily looked torn, wringing her hands. But if I come forward, Chloe's dad will destroy my chances of getting into college. He has connections everywhere. Imani's heart sank, but she refused to give up. I understand if you're scared, Emily. But this isn't just about me. It's about standing up to people who think they can do whatever they want just because they have money and power. You're stronger than you think. There was a long pause. Emily bit her lip, her eyes darting back and forth between Imani and Marcus. Finally, she took a deep breath. Okay. I'll do it. I'll testify. With Emily's agreement, Imani wasted no time. They went straight to Mrs. Hargrove's office, where Charles Thompson was already waiting. Emily's hands trembled as she handed over her phone with the original video file. This is the unedited version, Emily said, her voice barely more than a whisper. I filmed it myself. I swear it's real. Mrs. Hargrove watched the video intently, then glanced at Charles Thompson. This is exactly what we needed, she said, relief evident in her voice. Mr. Whitman won't be able to dispute this. Charles Thompson smiled at Imani, his eyes filled with pride. Well done, Miss Davis. You've shown tremendous courage. But just as they were about to leave, the door to the office burst open. Chloe's father stormed in, his face red with anger. What's the meaning of this? He demanded. I have a right to be here. Charles Thompson stood up, his demeanor calm but firm. Mr. Whitman, we've reviewed new evidence that confirms Imani's innocence. Your attempt to manipulate the board will not succeed. Mr. Whitman's face twisted in fury. You think you can ruin me? I have friends in high places. I'll see to it that your company suffers for this. Charles Thompson simply smiled. Good luck with that. I've already spoken to our legal team. If you continue down this path, you'll be facing a lawsuit for defamation and conspiracy. Mr. Whitman's bravado faltered, his eyes narrowing. This isn't over. No, Charles replied coolly. For you, it's just beginning. As Mr. Whitman stormed out, Chloe's influence crumbled like a house of cards. The board officially cleared Imani's name, and the scholarship was confirmed once and for all. Chloe was suspended for her actions, and Mr. Whitman's attempts to undermine the school were exposed, damaging his reputation. Walking out of the office, Imani felt a surge of relief wash over her. Marcus grinned and gave her a high five. You did it, Imani. They couldn't break you. Thanks, Marcus, Imani said, her smile wide. I couldn't have done it without you and Emily. As the rain finally stopped and the clouds parted, Imani felt a renewed sense of hope. She had faced her worst fears and emerged stronger. But she knew there were still challenges ahead, and she was ready for whatever came next. Little did she know, another twist was just around the corner, one that would test her resilience in ways she never expected. The day of the end-of-year award ceremony had finally arrived. Brookfield Academy was abuzz with excitement as students, teachers, and parents filled the grand auditorium. Imani stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down her dress. It felt surreal to be here, on the verge of finally achieving her dream. She had survived everything Chloe and her father had thrown at her, and now it was all coming down to this moment. Marcus appeared beside her, offering a comforting smile. You ready for this? He asked, his voice filled with pride. As ready as I'll ever be, Imani replied, taking a deep breath. She peeked through the curtain, seeing the packed audience, and her nerves spiked. But then she remembered all that she had overcome to get here. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let anything ruin it. The ceremony began with speeches from the school board members and various teachers. Imani stood behind the curtain, listening as Principal Hargrove took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today to celebrate the achievements of our outstanding students, Mrs. Hargrove announced. Today, we will be awarding the prestigious Brookfield Academy Scholarship to a student who has shown exceptional academic performance, leadership, and above all, integrity. Imani's heart pounded as Mrs. Hargrove continued, but her focus was momentarily broken when she noticed Charles Thompson entering the auditorium with his father, Mr. Thompson. Imani hadn't seen them since they helped her clear her name. She felt a surge of gratitude, knowing they had been instrumental in helping her get this far. Mrs. Hargrove's voice rang out clearly, drawing everyone's attention. This year's recipient has faced numerous challenges and displayed resilience beyond her years. She exemplifies the values we hold dear at Brookfield Academy. She paused dramatically. It is my honor to present the Brookfield Academy Scholarship to Imani Davis. The auditorium erupted in applause. Imani's knees almost buckled as she stepped out from behind the curtain. Tears welled up in her eyes as she made her way to the stage. The sound of clapping was overwhelming, and she could barely believe that this moment was real. Marcus gave her a thumbs up from the front row, his grin as wide as the sun. Congratulations, Miss Davis, Mrs. Hargrove said as she handed Imani a certificate. Your hard work, integrity, and determination have earned you this award. Imani took the microphone, her voice wavering as she addressed the audience. Thank you to everyone who believed in me, even when it felt like the whole world was against me. This scholarship means more than just a financial opportunity, it's a chance for me to build a future, and I promise I won't waste it. As she stepped down from the podium, she noticed Chloe and her father sitting stiffly in the audience, their faces like thunderclouds. Imani knew they were furious, but for once, they were powerless to stop her. After the ceremony, Charles Thompson approached Imani with a warm smile. Congratulations, Imani. I knew you had it in you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, Imani said, her voice filled with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without your support. Charles leaned in slightly. There's one more surprise, but I wanted to tell you in person. He gestured toward the doors leading out of the auditorium. Let's step outside for a moment. Confused but intrigued, Imani followed him into the school courtyard, where Mr. Thompson, the janitor, was waiting. His usual work uniform had been replaced by a sharp suit, and he looked almost unrecognizable. Mr. Thompson? Imani asked, her brow furrowed. What's going on? Charles smiled. Imani, my father and I have been watching your journey closely. We've been deeply impressed by your integrity and perseverance. Not only are you receiving the scholarship, but we would also like to offer you a full-time internship with our company once you graduate. Imani's eyes widened in disbelief. An internship? Are you serious? Mr. Thompson nodded, his eyes twinkling. Yes, young lady. You've proven you have what it takes to succeed, and we want to give you the opportunity to gain real-world experience. Consider it an extension of the scholarship, one that can open even more doors for you. Imani felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of joy. I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much. This is everything I've ever dreamed of. Charles Thompson placed a hand on her shoulder. You earned this, Imani. It's all because of who you are, not where you came from. Just as Imani was about to head back inside, a familiar voice called out behind her. She turned to see Chloe approaching, her expression tense. Imani, wait, Chloe said, her voice softer than Imani had ever heard it. Can we talk? Imani crossed her arms, wary. What do you want, Chloe? Chloe glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening, before speaking. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she muttered, her eyes downcast. I know I did a lot of horrible things, and I shouldn't have tried to ruin your life. I was just afraid. Afraid of what? Imani asked, genuinely puzzled. Chloe took a deep breath. Afraid that if someone like you could win, then maybe I wasn't as special as I thought I was. Her voice cracked. Everything I did was to try to protect my spot at the top, but in the end, it didn't matter. You still won. Imani studied Chloe's face, searching for any signs of deception. But all she saw was a girl who was tired of fighting, who had finally realized that her attempts to control everything had left her with nothing. I appreciate the apology, Imani said slowly. But words don't mean much without actions. If you really want to change, you have to show it. Chloe nodded, looking both relieved and humbled. I will. I promise. Imani gave her a small, cautious smile. Good luck with that. As Chloe turned and walked away, Imani couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. For the first time, she realized that Chloe's cruelty had stemmed from her own insecurities. But that was Chloe's battle to fight now. Imani had her own future to focus on. With the scholarship secured and a bright future ahead, Imani walked back into the auditorium to rejoin the celebration. The weight she had carried all year had finally lifted, and she felt lighter than she ever had before. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had proven to herself and everyone else that she was capable of achieving her dreams, no matter how many obstacles were thrown in her way. And now, with the scholarship, the internship, and a newfound confidence, she was ready to take on whatever came next. As she rejoined Marcus and her classmates, laughter and congratulations surrounded her. Imani knew that this was only the beginning. She had fought hard to earn her place, and she wasn't about to stop now. Little did she know, life had even more surprises waiting for her beyond the walls of Brookfield Academy. But for now, she was ready to celebrate the victory she had so rightfully earned. The sun was setting over Brookfield Academy, casting a warm golden glow across the campus. The award ceremony had ended hours ago, but the euphoria of the day still lingered in the air. Imani walked slowly through the empty courtyard, the cool evening breeze brushing against her face. The weight of the past year had finally lifted, and for the first time in a long while, she felt completely free. As she approached the front gates, she heard a familiar voice call her name. Imani. Wait up. Turning, she saw Marcus jogging toward her, a wide grin plastered on his face. You didn't think I was going to let you leave without celebrating properly, did you? He asked, catching his breath. Imani laughed, shaking her head. I don't know how I'm supposed to celebrate more after today. It still feels like a dream. Well, it's real, Marcus said, giving her a friendly nudge. You did it, Imani. You proved everyone wrong. Imani's smile softened as she looked back at the school that had once felt so intimidating. I couldn't have done it without you, she said sincerely. You stuck by me through everything, even when things got really bad. Marcus shrugged modestly. Hey, you would have done the same for me. Besides, I knew you had it in you. You just needed someone to remind you of how strong you are. Imani felt a swell of gratitude as they walked together. She had come to Brookfield alone, but now she had friends who had stood by her when it mattered most. So, what's next for you? Marcus asked, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. Imani took a deep breath, considering his question. Well, I have that internship with Mr. Thompson's company, she said, her voice filled with excitement. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm ready. And with the scholarship, I'll finally be able to go to the college I've always dreamed of. That's amazing, Imani, Marcus said, his smile widening. You've earned every bit of it. As they continued walking, Imani couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened over the past year. She had started at Brookfield feeling like an outsider, constantly under attack from Chloe and her clique. But despite everything, she had held on to her integrity and never lost sight of who she was. Just as they reached the parking lot, Imani's phone buzzed with a notification. She pulled it out, surprised to see a message from Chloe. Hey, Imani. I know this probably won't mean much, but I just wanted to say thank you. You were right, words don't mean much without actions. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I'm going to try to be better. I hope you can forgive me someday. Imani stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had never expected an apology from Chloe, let alone one that seemed sincere. Turning to Marcus, she showed him the text. Do you think she means it? She asked, uncertain. Marcus studied the message and shrugged. I don't know. But it sounds like she's trying. Maybe almost losing everything made her realize what really matters. Imani nodded thoughtfully. I guess people can change if they really want to. She took a deep breath and typed out a reply. I appreciate the message, Chloe. Good luck with everything. As she sent the message, she felt a strange sense of closure. Chloe's apology didn't erase everything that had happened, but it was a start. And Imani was ready to leave the past behind. The next morning, Imani stood in her tiny apartment, looking at the acceptance letter from her dream college pinned to the refrigerator. She had read it 100 times, but it still felt surreal. The scholarship, the internship, the new opportunities, it was more than she could have ever imagined. Her mom walked into the kitchen, a proud smile lighting up her tired eyes. I still can't believe it, baby, she said, hugging Imani tightly. You're going to be the first in our family to go to college. I know, Mom, Imani said, blinking back tears. And I'm going to make you proud. I promise. Her mom pulled back, her eyes shining. You already have, Imani. More than you'll ever know. As they shared a quiet moment together, Imani couldn't help but think of everything that had brought her to this point. The struggles, the bullying, the moments when she thought she couldn't go on. But through it all, she had remained true to herself. And now, she was finally seeing the rewards of all her hard work and resilience. A few weeks later, Imani found herself standing in the bustling office of Thompson Enterprises for the first day of her internship. She wore a new outfit her mom had saved up to buy her, a crisp blazer and skirt that made her look and feel like a professional. Charles Thompson greeted her with a warm handshake. "Welcome to your new journey, Imani," he said with a proud smile. "I have no doubt you'll excel here just as you did at Brookfield." Imani beamed, her confidence soaring. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm ready to work hard and learn everything I can." As she was led to her new desk, Imani couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come. Just a year ago, she had been that scared, uncertain girl struggling to fit in at Brookfield Academy. Now, she was stepping into a world of new possibilities, ready to carve out her future. But just as she settled into her desk, she received an email that made her pause. It was from Mrs. Hargrove, the principal of Brookfield Academy, inviting her back to the school for a special event. The school wanted her to speak to the incoming class of seniors about overcoming adversity. Imani smiled to herself. It was a chance to pass on what she had learned, to inspire others to keep fighting even when the odds seemed stacked against them. She replied to the email with a simple, "Yes, I'd be honored." Imani leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at the city skyline. Her story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new obstacles, but she was ready for them. Because if she had learned anything this past year, it was that she had the strength to face whatever life threw her way. With a heart full of hope and a future full of possibilities, Imani Davis was ready to take on the world.